Far beyond the familiar stars where charts grew thin and explorers rarely dared to look, the small planet of Varkos spun silently in the shadow of a dying sun. The Threlians, a proud but cautious alien race, had called Varkos home for centuries. Their cities, shaped like spirals of glowing crystal, glimmered under the twin moons, and their scholars often gazed out into the endless dark, listening for any whisper from the void. One such whisper had arrived unexpectedly, a faint signal pulsing from a deep corner of space, unlike any the Threlians had recorded before. It was rhythmic, steady, and full of strange patterns that danced across their sensors like an eerie melody. The signal was weak, nearly lost among the static, but it carried a feeling that was impossible to ignore, a desperate plea for help. The Threlians' best linguists and scientists gathered to decode the message, their minds racing to understand the strange symbols and sounds. Hours turned to days, and finally, the message began to take shape. It was a distress call, a human SOS call for aid from a species the Threlians had only heard about in old galactic myths told by travelers from far-off systems. The humans were supposed to be long gone from this sector, their colonies lost to ancient wars. But this signal was very real and very recent, or so it seemed. The Threlians' curiosity grew, mixed with unease. Should they respond? Their leaders debated, torn between caution and the moral call to help a suffering race. In the end, they sent a reply, a carefully crafted message of peace and readiness to assist. But what they did not know was that this SOS was no ordinary distress call. It was an ancient beacon, part of a hidden defense system from a brutal era in human history. When the Threlians sent their answer, they unknowingly activated a sleeper fleet of human warships known as the Deathworlders. These were not the peaceful humans of legend, but elite warriors forged in the harshest worlds, trained to survive and fight in environments so deadly that most species could not live there. As the first of these warships blinked into existence near Varkos, alarms rang out across the Threlian capital. The sky darkened with the shadow of metal giants, and the peaceful signal that had once promised help now carried a terrible weight. Panic spread quickly. The Threlians scrambled to understand what had gone wrong, but their best minds were unprepared for the scale of what was coming. The Deathworlder fleet was unlike anything they had faced, silent, efficient, and deadly. The fleet commander, Captain Hayes, a human veteran with cold eyes and sharp instincts, received the order to investigate the SOS. He had no idea how long the beacon had been waiting in the void, nor did he know that his fleet's arrival would cause such fear. To Hayes and his crew, this was simply a mission: find the source of the signal, assess the threat, and act accordingly. But as the Deathworlders entered Threlian space, their mere presence ignited a series of misunderstandings and fear that could explode into war. The Threlians watched helplessly as the metal giants approached, unsure if the humans were friend or foe. Their own ships were not built for war on this scale, and the ancient stories about humans told of warriors unmatched in strength and cunning. The tension grew thick. Inside the Threlian command center, diplomats and generals argued fiercely. Some wanted to send envoys to parley, others urged preparation for battle. The clock was ticking, and every moment the Deathworlders stayed near Varkos, the greater the risk of catastrophe. Meanwhile, Captain Hayes received reports of strange signals and strange beings watching them warily from their crystal towers. He knew this was no ordinary mission, but his duty was clear. The ancient SOS had awakened the fleet, and now the humans had to face the consequences of a forgotten past. Somewhere deep in the dark corridors of Varkos, a secret lay hidden the true reason the SOS was sent. It was not a plea for peace, but a trap set by a rival alien species to lure the Deathworlders into a deadly fight. As the stars flickered coldly overhead, both humans and Threlians found themselves caught in a deadly game of chance and survival. Neither side could turn back now. The SOS from the edge of the galaxy had done more than summon help. It had awakened a force that might destroy everything in its path. The silence before the storm was heavy with fear and uncertainty, and the future of Varkos, and perhaps the whole sector, hung by a thread. As the massive human warships slipped silently through the space near Varkos, the Threlians watched with growing dread. Their sensor readings showed ships unlike any they had seen before, hulking, heavily armored, and armed with weapons that could turn entire cities to ash. Panic swept through their cities, and emergency sirens echoed through the glowing crystal towers. The Threlian fleets scrambled to form defensive lines, but their ships were smaller and built for exploration, not war. The Deathworlder commanders, led by Captain Hayes, showed no signs of hostility yet. Their orders were to assess the situation, but their presence alone was a message of power. The Threlian scientists, working feverishly, discovered something chilling. The SOS they had answered was not a true cry for help, but a lure created by a shadowy rival species known only as the Draxans. These ruthless beings wanted to pit the humans against the Threlians, hoping the destruction of both would leave their enemies weakened. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Threlian Council. Diplomats rushed to open channels of communication with the Deathworlders, hoping to explain the trap before the first shot was fired. Captain Hayes, however, was wary and hardened by years of combat on savage planets. Trust was not easily given. Every word exchanged was measured and tense, the threat of violence hanging heavy in the air. Meanwhile, the Draxans began their own moves, sending stealth ships to stir trouble and keep the conflict alive. The Threlians realized they were caught in a web far bigger than themselves, forced to navigate between an ancient, deadly human force and a cunning enemy who thrived in chaos. As the Deathworlder fleet moved closer to Varkos, the planet's surface braced for the storm to come. Citizens hurried to shelters, families clung to hope, and warriors prepared to defend their homes. Captain Hayes understood the weight of the situation. This was no simple rescue mission anymore. It was a test of survival, trust, and the harsh truth that sometimes an old signal could awaken dangers far beyond anyone's control. The countdown to conflict had begun, and with it, the fate of Varkos and its people hung perilously in balance. Tensions between the Threlians and the Deathworlder fleet reached a breaking point as mistrust simmered just beneath the surface. But amid the growing fear, a brave Threlian diplomat named Solara stepped forward with a desperate plan to prevent disaster. Risking everything, she managed to open a fragile line of communication with Captain Hayes, the battle-hardened human commander who saw the Threlians only as potential obstacles or threats. Their first conversations were cold and cautious, filled with suspicion and barely hidden hostility, yet both understood the truth they shared. Neither side wanted to fall into the trap set by the shadowy Draxans lurking beyond, watching and waiting to destroy them all. As Solara spoke with Hayes, she learned of the brutal origins of the Deathworlders, humans shaped by hardship, survivors of deadly planets called Deathworlds, where only the strongest endured. She realized that despite their fearsome reputation, these humans were not invincible gods of war, but warriors with deep loyalty to their mission and an unyielding will to survive. Captain Hayes, in turn, saw the Threlians not just as fragile beings scared of his fleet's power, but as intelligent allies who could help fight the true enemy. Slowly, a fragile alliance took root, forged by necessity and a shared enemy rather than trust or friendship. Together, they planned how to face the Draxans' looming invasion. This uneasy partnership challenged both species to look beyond their fears and prejudices, pushing them toward a future neither had imagined. The Threlians, once isolated and peaceful, prepared to fight alongside the humans beings whose strength was born from harsh worlds and unbreakable spirit. The Deathworlders, once distant and feared, began to see a reason to protect a new kind of home. But the danger was far from over. The Draxans were mobilizing, their shadowy forces gathering for a full-scale attack on Varkos. Time was running out, and every decision carried the weight of countless lives. As the two sides prepared for battle, each moment brought them closer to a fight that could change the fate of the galaxy itself. The dark silence of space shattered suddenly as the Draxan forces unleashed their attack on Varkos, their sleek warships cutting through the void like deadly shadows, aiming to crush both the Threlians and the Deathworlders before an alliance could truly form. The skies above Varkos erupted in flashes of light and fire as the two unlikely allies scrambled to defend their fragile home. Captain Hayes led the Deathworlder fleet with cold precision, weaving through enemy fire and striking back with devastating force, while three Lion ships darted between the larger war machines, using their speed and agility to disrupt the Draxan formations. On the planet's surface, three Lion warriors stood ready, their crystal blades humming with energy, while human soldiers prepared their own brutal tactics for close combat. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Every strike from the Draxans was met with desperate resistance. Explosions shook the atmosphere, and once proud cities were reduced to ruins beneath the relentless assault. Yet, amid the destruction, the humans and Threelians fought side by side, learning to trust one another in ways neither had imagined possible. Captain Hayes, seeing the courage and determination of the Threelians, felt a new sense of respect for these strange allies. Solara, the diplomat-turned-fighter, led daring missions to sabotage Draxan supply lines, her bravery inspiring those around her. The tides of battle swung like a storm, with victories and losses on both sides. But the Draxans were ruthless and cunning, using every trick to try to break the alliance. As the warships clashed above and ground forces battled below, the true cost of the conflict became clear. This fight was not just for Varkos, but for the survival of two very different peoples now bound by fate. In the dark heart of the battle, a shocking discovery awaited: an ancient weapon buried deep beneath Varkos' surface, capable of turning the war's tide if only it could be unleashed before the Draxans destroyed everything. The battle had turned into a brutal test of endurance and will. On the surface of Varkos, the landscape was scarred by fire and shattered crystal towers. The great cities once glittering with light were now hollowed skeletons, broken by explosions and the relentless pounding of war. The Threelians, a race born from peace and science, fought with a fierce determination born from the desperation of protecting their home. Beside them stood the Deathworlders, humans shaped by planets, harsh beyond imagination planets, where only the toughest survived. Their armor was battered, their faces worn with exhaustion, yet their eyes burned with a fire that spoke of unyielding strength. Captain Hayes and Solara, once strangers from different worlds, moved together through the ruined streets, their steps echoing in the silence between clashes. They had learned the truth of the ancient weapon buried beneath Varkos. The weapon was no ordinary tool of war, but a part of the planet itself, a crystalline heart that could unleash energy far beyond any known technology. But activating it was a perilous task. The chamber where it lay was deep underground, a labyrinth of tunnels glowing faintly with the planet's natural light. It was also heavily guarded, not just by the enemy, but by traps and ancient defenses designed to keep the power contained. "We don't have much time," Solara whispered as she led the way, her hands steady on the glowing walls. "The Draxans will try to stop us the moment they learn what we're doing." Captain Hayes nodded. "Good. Let them come. We'll show them what happens when they threaten Varkos." Their small team of mixed Threelians and Deathworlder soldiers moved silently, weapons ready, alert to every sound. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt, thick with energy that vibrated through their bones. Hayes felt a strange connection to the place, reminders of the death worlds he had survived, where the land itself was a living enemy, unpredictable and deadly. Here, that feeling was stronger. The crystalline walls pulsed gently, as if the planet was watching them, judging their worthiness. Suddenly, a harsh sound echoed through the tunnels, the sharp crack of laser fire. Draxan scouts had found them. Chaos erupted. The team scattered, returning fire with precision and ferocity. Solara ducked behind a crystalline pillar as bullets chipped away at the edges. Hayes took point, his combat training guiding every movement, every breath. The battle was close, brutal, and dangerous. One of the Threelian warriors was hit, collapsing quietly, but they pushed forward. Their lives and their home depended on it. At last, after what felt like hours but could only have been minutes, they reached the core chamber. The sight before them was breathtaking, a massive crystalline structure, glowing with swirling colors, humming with power. It was alive in a way, connected deeply to the planet's life force. The air around it shimmered with energy. Solara moved forward, placing her hands on the crystal surface. "We need to synchronize our efforts. Both species must activate it together, or the power could become unstable." Captain Hayes stepped forward, joining his hand to hers. As their fingers touched the crystal, a surge of energy pulsed through them. Visions of the planet's ancient past flashed in their minds, times of peace and war, hope and despair. The weapon was not just a tool, but a test of unity. Far above ground, the battle raged on. The combined fleets of Threelians and Deathworlders held the line as best they could, but the Draxan forces were relentless. Warships screamed across the skies, firing missiles and plasma beams, turning parts of Varkos' surface into molten wasteland. Explosions lit the horizon like new suns, and the cries of battle echoed through the ruins. But then, from the planet's heart, a brilliant beam of light shot upward. It cut through the darkness and chaos like a sword. The ancient weapon had awakened. The beam struck the Draxan fleet, causing massive systems to fail, disabling their weapons and shields. Panic rippled through the enemy lines. Now! Hayes shouted, and the Allied fleet surged forward, pressing their advantage. The Draxans, stunned and broken, retreated in disorder. Victory was within reach. Yet, the cost was clear. Many brave souls lay fallen, the scars of war etched into the very surface of Varkos. But hope had been reborn. The SOS that once threatened to summon death had instead summoned an alliance, a new beginning for two very different peoples. As the dust settled, Hayes looked at Solara, the alien diplomat who had become his closest ally. "This isn't just survival," he said quietly. "It's a chance to build something better." Solara smiled, hope shining in her eyes. "Together, we will rebuild." And in that moment, beneath the stars of a battered world, two species began to forge a future, one born not from fear or war, but from trust, courage, and the hard-won peace that only unity could bring.